Did you know that the first Consumer Protection Act in the United States was designed to protect the quality of whiskey? Welcome to another episode of Whistery, where I explore the rich and colorful heritage of your favorite beverage. I'm your professor, Bourbon Barry, and do I have a story for you? Let's travel back in time to the late 1800s, when the whiskey industry was more unregulated than you could ever imagine. At the time, there was huge competition between whiskey distillers and whiskey rectifiers. Rectifiers, similar to today's non-distiller producers, purchased distillate from other sources. The problem was that there was no control or oversight on how those rectifiers handled that distillate. That means that nobody really knew how long these whiskeys were being aged, nor did they know whether any additives, such as flavorings or colorings, were being added to the final product. As a result, the market was flooded with this cheap knockoff bourbon, and that made it much more difficult for legitimate whiskey distillers to get a foothold selling straight bourbon whiskey. And in fact, many companies were forced into bankruptcy. Now, straight bourbon producers weren't about to take this issue lying down, and by the 1890s, this issue wound up in the courts. One of the early crusaders is our friend from our previous episode, Colonel E.H. Taylor. This guy. Still stinging from his ugly breakup with George T. Stagg, Taylor partnered with John G. Carlisle, who was the Secretary of Treasury at the time. And if you remember from my previous episode, Colonel Taylor was driven to produce only the highest quality bourbons. In order to ensure that consumers were getting the highest quality bourbon whiskey possible, whiskey distillers argued for a set of legal regulations. And so the Bottled in Bond Act was proposed. This act ensured that any whiskey bearing the name Bottled in Bond was produced by the same distiller at the same distillery using the same distilling season, aged for at least 4 years, unadulterated save for pure water dilution, and bottled at exactly 100 proof. The bottle also had to indicate where the whiskey was distilled and bottled, and also had to carry a safety seal, of course, bearing the image of Secretary of Treasury John G. Carlisle. Now, as you can imagine, this act did not pass without a fight. Folks like Isaac Wolf Bernheim, founder of I.W. Harper Distillery and namesake of Bernheim Wheat Whiskey, fought vehemently against the legislation. But ultimately, the act was signed into law by President Grover Cleveland on March 3rd, 1897. Other laws would follow, like the 1906 Pure Food and Drug Act, but it was whiskey that Americans wanted to protect first. So the next time you pour up a delicious pour of E.H. Taylor Small Batch Bottled in Bond or any Bottled in Bond whiskey, you have giants like Colonel E.H. Taylor to thank for the quality and purity of the sip. I'm your Professor Bourbon Barry. Thanks for watching.